Alrighty, welcome everybody to our latest Showrunner Huddle. Always very excited about these. This one is a public huddle, so we've been tweeting it out. Not sure, we'll probably get mostly course people because that's what we tend to get on these. But if anybody else wants to come in and ask questions, we'll be happy to answer them. So just kind of our office hours to hang out with you guys for an hour every other week and answer whatever questions you have. And so we're excited to do that now. And we will begin, well, first I'll begin by welcoming you, Johnny. It's good to see you.
You too, man. It's every 2 weeks, but yeah, I don't know. It seems longer sometimes.
I know, and I think in the future we're going to push these out to 12:30, right? We're going to push them out a couple of hours.
Okay. Actually, time to shower, take your hat off.
Yeah, exactly.
Those kinds of things, or at least you'll have less of an excuse at that point.
Right. I figure it's still early. It's 9 o'clock. You can get away with wearing the hat. You know, it's all good. I mean, I'm wearing the same thing as you. I just have a hat on.
Right. It really changes it.
Yeah. Oh, hey, look, the Blab person is in here asking us if everything is okay. It is okay. Johnny was able to get in. Hey, one quick question for you, Blab Stud. Do you know why that message comes up with the network error, Jason? Because Johnny had it happen. We just love to know. Johnny had it happen when he was trying to log in from his house. And I had that happen on another Blab session that I did. But that person, he was a teacher and he was actually at his school. So we figured that might be why the firewall was happening.
I'm on Jason, I'm on MacBook Pro on Chrome.
Yeah.
Home Wi-Fi. The same Wi-Fi we use every time we do a Blab.
Yeah, and he hasn't had the issue. So let us know if there's anything there. That is a generic error message. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, let us know if there's anything we can do or any safeguards to put in place so that doesn't happen. We'll be happy to do that. All right. So with that said, let's get to our first question because the question comes from Nance, and Nance is here.
But thanks, Jason. Thanks for your Blab. It's awesome.
It is. It is awesome. We love it. So here's a question, Johnny, and this is a really interesting question because we actually had this very question on a Digital Commerce Academy Q&A that I hosted yesterday. And so I was able to get some really good perspective on this from Tony Clark and Chris Garrett. But the question is, how do we as showrunners figure out what to outsource? And Nance sent me this question via email and had a lot of background in the question. But Nance is facing what a lot of showrunners are facing, which is when you're starting out with a show, and especially if you've never done a podcast before, and especially as in Nance's case, when you haven't really launched a site on WordPress before. So Nance is coming at this from perhaps even, a more difficult angle that some people are who at least have kind of experience with WordPress, but Nance is having to really do a whole bunch of new things. And so when you're in this situation, and you're just starting out, so it's not like the podcast is necessarily proven yet. It isn't bringing in revenue yet. You're having to put in all this time to learn. You're having to put in all this time to create the content. And then, of course, there's all the time for the production and the post-production and everything that goes into it. So how do you, A, manage that massive time investment, which we know that it is, and B, how do you know what to outsource and how are you able to outsource if it's not necessarily a revenue center yet? So I thought this would be an interesting question, Johnny, for you to kind of kick off because you really faced this with Hack the Entrepreneur, where you started out and you were doing a lot of it yourself and you were doing a lot of it before. I mean, you had a sponsor, but before it was really bringing in a lot of money. So it's not like the podcast could pay for itself to outsource. So how did you make these decisions in terms of outsourcing and at what stage of your show's development did you make them?
Yeah, it is. It's a good question and it's a tough question. And so I made the choice beforehand when I started the show that I wasn't going to just throw money at it from like another business and just kind of make it, because I felt like I needed to understand a certain amount of things. I didn't know anything really enough about podcasting, I thought, and I kind of wanted to just get into it. And I had the time to do it. Like I was lucky. I literally didn't have anything else to do at the time. So I just went in with the idea that I was going to hire an editor for the audio as soon as I could get a sponsor. And then I was going to get a virtual assistant at the same time. And luckily, like at week 8 or something, I got a sponsor and I was able to get both of those. And I kept both of those all the way through the process now because they're very, very helpful. But something I've actually learned, I'm going to say within the last 3 to 4 months, is the more that I'm willing to let go of and outsource, the better my show gets. And the better I get at the part that I'm supposed to be doing, which is the hosting, and doing that part really well and focusing on my guests and focusing on the actual product that gets put out to my listeners. And the advice I would want to give is, if you have the resources to outsource, don't not outsource because you think that you should keep control of things. That's not what a showrunner does. The showrunner from television, is a producer. The producer ultimately doesn't do anything except for hire people to do all the different parts of it, and orchestrate the whole thing. It's what's done, right? We hire great writers. We hire great actresses. We hire great marketing people. That's what we do to make the show really, really good. And I think the sooner that you can get into that mindset and get to that point through resources that you can generate either from your show, or if you want to put money into it and do it, your show will grow faster and it will get better faster. But it's such a subjective thing to the person. Each host is going to be in a different position. But we see new shows coming out now by either celebrities or by companies that have resources, and those shows start and scale faster because they instantly start with money that they're going to know, we're going to make this a production and we're going to bring people in to do this, 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 and this. And it happens quicker. It happens better. But I obviously can't tell you to do that. But if you were in a position to do that, then by all means, it will help you be better at it. And it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to let go of. It wasn't hard for me to let go of editing because I was really terrible at editing, and I knew it. But it was really hard for me to let go of production and like going into my Libsyn and actually setting things up to go. And it's so freeing to not have to do that stuff anymore. So it's just one of those things that's really hard. The sooner you can get to that point and outsource, then take the biggest frustration points for yourself, take those off your plate. If editing isn't that bad to you, if you kind of like, I kind of like this, some people are really into that side of it, then obviously don't outsource that first. Outsource maybe the production or the marketing side or finding new guests side, the part that you don't like, because it'll make it more enjoyable for you, which will make you more excited about the whole process and will make you want to be more sustainable and push through the hard times. So you have to kind of know which parts. It's usually, I think, pretty obvious in any sort of business. It's usually obvious the part that we dislike the most as a person. And we're all different, right? Some of us love the numbers. Some of us just love the big picture and the marketing. Some of us, you have to kind of know that about yourself and then choose to get rid of the stuff that you really don't like doing first, because it'll make the whole rest of it more enjoyable for you.
Yeah. It's a great answer, Johnny. And what you just said actually echoes one of the things that Tony said yesterday on this Q&A that we did, which was, what is that element of whatever you're doing that when you wake up in the morning, you dread doing? Outsource that. Because if that's keeping you from, sitting down, or it's, causing you anxiety and it's infecting the time that you're spending on the stuff that you really love doing, now you're really hurting yourself and your business and your customers and everybody because you're not giving them the best. So that's one way to decide. And the other way, that Chris Garrett basically coached folks was, what shouldn't you be doing and what can't you do? Look at those two things. So for instance, what shouldn't you be doing? What are just kind of some rote activities that happen every single time that don't require any particular level of expertise, any special judgment by you that someone else can do? That could be turning your episode into bullet points for show notes, or it could be, doing the transcript, right? Like there's things that you just shouldn't be doing because they don't require this special thing that you bring to it. And then what can't you do? So, if your website, if you need to change the colors on your website and you don't know how to do CSS, fumbling around with it for 2 hours to figure it out may not be the best use of your time, whereas paying someone who could do it in 5 minutes may be, because you can't do it. And so those two things, what can't you do, what shouldn't you do, combined with what do you hate to do, if you can outsource those things and then really allow yourself to focus, like you said, Johnny, on the stuff that you love. It's like now you with Hack the Entrepreneur, you get to really focus on, determining who your guests are going to be and making sure those interviews with those guests are as good as possible. And then taking your content and doing extra things with it, like the book, and like creating your 1,000 Maniacs course. So it really allows you to think forward, move forward, push forward, instead of being back here doing all the stuff that you already know how to do. So it's not like it's adding you any value in terms of learning, and you don't like it. So it's not adding to your enthusiasm. And that's why I think, as you said, your show gets better because you're able to do all of that. And so, now again, then it comes up with the question of, okay, that's all great. And in a perfect world, I wouldn't do anything that I don't like, that I shouldn't do, and that I can't do. But we live in the reality of we have a finite amount of resources. And, so, Nance asked this question. Now he's wondering how to assess when he's ready to get a sponsor, because that is one way for podcasters to start to make some money that helps you offset the resource investment and gives you resources that you can then put to outsourcing. So what do you think for that? How do you assess when you're ready to get a sponsor? Which is a tough question. I mean, there's no perfect answer here. And really each show is going to be different, because I didn't think the Assembly Call was ready for a sponsor, but a sponsor came to us. So clearly we were. I just wasn't really thinking about it. You had a sponsor with Hack the Entrepreneur before you had even proven the concept of the show. So,
yeah.
That it's an interesting question, because in that sense, you could say every show is ready for a sponsor if you can find the right match. And sometimes that may be looking in your network, determining who do I know right now that would be such a perfect fit for the show, and I can make that case, and I can paint the picture, show them where the show is going. You may be ready for a sponsor right away, but if you don't have anybody in your network, and you can't really paint the picture, describe the path to building an audience for your show, then you may not be ready yet. I think you were in that position to do that, and it's going to be different for each showrunner.
It will, yeah. And you have to admit to yourself that it's a sales call. Like, it's a sales process, finding a sponsor in that way. Even when sponsors came to me at the beginning and I picked FreshBooks, I still had to then, they just come at you and just say, do you take sponsorships? And then it's like, well, can we see your sales sheet? Or can we see your offer? Or can we see what you have packages? Can we see your numbers? And then you have to make a case. You have to then do the sales process. So I think that, Nance, if you're ready to do that, if you feel ready to sort of propose your show as a valid platform for a sponsor, if you feel ready with the numbers, if you feel ready with understanding your audience enough, then you're ready. You're completely ready right now. And that could be 100 listeners, but you know them so well, and you've tracked them, and you have people on email list, all these kinds of things. If you have that confidently within you, it doesn't matter what the numbers are. But I've seen people with massive audiences that don't feel ready to be able to sell it as something to sponsor. Unfortunately, I can't convince you that you have to do that, but you do. People are going to ask, I don't care how big the platform is, they're going to want numbers, they're going to want a package, what does it cost? What do I get? What are some other examples you've done? All these kinds of things. And of course, when you have a first show, it's going to take fumbling around and making up some of those numbers, because you don't know what the offer is. What if you should charge $100 for a mid-roll, or if you should charge $300, or if you should charge $500. It's going to take some work, but that's how selling anything is. But it is absolutely a sales process. And when you get confident in that, and you just all of a sudden wake up and you're like, yeah, I think I have a pack. I think for $100, they could have 2 shows, and they would get this, this, and this for me. They would get on-site text link. They'll get a pre-roll and a mid-roll from me. The one will be 15 seconds, one will be 45 seconds. I'll do this many call to actions within it. And maybe I'll also mention it to my 73 newsletter subscribers. There you go. You have an offer. And if you're willing to take that and either get on a phone with somebody or email somebody cold about it, then you're ready. The worst that they can say is no. That's how sales work. But until you feel that confidence, I don't think anybody's ready for sponsorships. Sponsorships just don't come to you with money handing out. It sounds like it did with FreshBooks for me, but no, there was a negotiation that went on. They approached me first, and it was awesome. And it turned out to be a really, really good, beneficial partnership, but it took effort. We had to figure out some numbers. They're not just going to hand you cash and expect nothing in advance or in return, right? And so that's where the whole partnership, and Jared and I, in the course, we went into a really great, Jared interviewed me about the idea with partnerships and stuff. And it's really valuable because of the sales process. When you make that one sale, if it's all lopsided and you're just trying to do a big cash grab and don't give enough benefit, then it's not going to be a good partnership and it's not going to last. And it's easier to keep selling to the same people. I still sell stuff to FreshBooks. I came up with a new offer a few weeks ago, and the first people I thought of was like, FreshBooks. Emailed my guy at FreshBooks, gave him the offer, and within like 2 hours, it was signed and done. It was just it's a good partnership. And I would have screwed that up if I had tried to just take too much at the beginning, or if I didn't provide enough value, and if I didn't sell that to them.
Let me also offer this. When it comes to outsourcing, getting help for your show, and Nance, I believe that you work in a university environment. And I will say that with the Assembly Call, we didn't have any money coming into that show until really this past season. But I've had help now for 3 seasons. And the way that I did that was to set up an internship program. And that has allowed me to work with students at Indiana University who want to get experience in online marketing, who want, and who just want to be part of something fun that kind of deals with Indiana basketball when they, maybe can't get that opportunity elsewhere. And so that might be something to look at, is if there is, a local university where you live, or, in my case, obviously the fit with the university was easy because the show is around a college basketball team, but that doesn't need to be. There are, a lot of universities now are getting into, I know just here at SMU, a friend of mine down here started a social media class. And there's a lot of universities that are adding this to their curriculum, but they're a little bit behind in terms of opportunities that they offer to their students. And I know it was huge. When I talked with the guy at Indiana, he was really excited about offering this to students because they were looking to offer more of these types of opportunities. And obviously, working with a college student is a little bit different than working with a professional. And, you have to be much more specific with the tasks that you need done. And you may have to kind of do a little bit more double checking than you might want to. But when you really find a good person, like I've been really lucky that one of the guys we found 2 years ago has basically become a full-time part of the team. And we actually just hired him to do some work at Rainmaker because he's so focused on attention to detail and works really, really well. And he does a lot of, he'll round up links for our link roundups and do editing and do some of this stuff that I don't need to do. So I can work now on putting an ebook together that takes our content to the next step. So I would really look at that as an opportunity for a way where instead of the value that you're exchanging being money, the value that you're exchanging can be the experience of working on a podcast, working in online marketing, working in digital business. And that's a very valuable experience for a young person. And so that's one way to get some help without having to spend, a lot of money to do it. And it's worked really well for me. And I know there's a lot of opportunities out there for folks to do that. So think about that too.
That's smart. That's really smart. It's shocking. I think we undervalue our own show and what we can, what somebody could learn by working with, and people and
what we can gain from it, because these folks can really, if we give some good instruction, they can take this stuff and run with it. And a lot of times the young people are comfortable in these environments, especially with social media. Maybe you want to outsource your social media, they're obviously young people know social media well, so they can do that. So it fits.
Smart. It's really smart. I like it.
Chris here in the chat says that he's teaming up with the Small Business Development Center to produce a Fort Worth Entrepreneur Cast. That's awesome. They have very low targets, going to launch in the next couple of weeks. They have 8 episodes in the can, thinking about working with a local bank for a modest sponsorship and having a slot for my consulting biz. That's perfect. Mm-hmm. And that's a great fit for what you want to do. And plus, you get in the habit of having a sponsor. Your audience gets in the habit of you having a sponsor there. And now you're selling something that exists rather than, kind of this nebulous thing that you're trying to sell that you've never done before. So even if it's an unpaid sponsorship, and even if it's for your own stuff, just having that spot in there conditions your audience for it, number one, and now you have something specific to sell. It's like when we were talking with SeatGeek for the Assembly Call, and we were talking about, okay, when is this ad going to go in? And I was like, well, the perfect time is right after our intro around the horn segment. we always do a call to action to our email list so our audience is ready for it. We'll just sub your sponsorship in right there. It'll be perfect. And I was like, okay, that works. I mean, our audience is used to hearing some kind of call to action there. So that's the other way, Nance, to get ready for a sponsorship, if you know you want to go down that road, is to start doing a sponsorship, even if it's for your own email list. I mean, you should be the sponsor for your own show anyway. So put that in there and just get everybody used to it and make it part of your normal workflow. So
and Chris, it's an excellent idea, getting a bank for a sponsorship. I would just get rid of the modest sponsorship part. People like, only because it's a negotiation, right? It's you're going to start at a figure, and they might just say yes, or they might say, well, no. And then you could be, well, I mean, this is my first one, and I think that you'd be a great fit, so maybe we could work out a deal. And it's if we undercut ourselves, and I'm only saying this because I just went through this with. I'm putting out the Hack the Entrepreneur Top 10, and with FreshBooks, they were the ones I put the offer to. I thought, what if I haven't done this top 10. I've talked about it for months. And if I can just get revenue for it, then I'll just outsource it completely and I won't have to do it, but it'll get done. It'll help my show, all this stuff. And I literally sat there putting together the offer, and I thought of a figure, and I was like, yeah. And then as I was typing it up, I doubled the figure, and I was like, okay, that's better. And then I tripled the figure, and I sent it to them, and within 2 hours it was signed. So a bank is, sometimes they're going to, if it's too modest, they're going to not take it seriously. And if it's at a certain level, I mean, Yellow Pages, all these ad things are super expensive for people. So don't undervalue yourself right at the beginning, because you might actually miss the opportunity. That's my rant for you. It's an awesome idea. You have like an entrepreneur-based podcast for like a specific geographic region. That's exactly perfect for a local bank. So just make sure you keep it as, just make the offer good. Have them come back and say, what if we do something a little bit less? Perfect. But it's hard to go up from there. So.
Chris said he stole some hack questions, by the way.
Nice. That's what I like to hear. My questions are all stolen too, so it's okay.
All right. So that's a great question, Nance. Thank you for asking that. We had a great time talking about it on the Digital Commerce Institute Q&A too. And I know it's a question that a lot of people think about and wonder about. So glad that we were able to discuss that. So here's a question from Rodrigo, Johnny. He's curious. There's a question asked on the forums regarding premium podcast content. What do you think about the strategy of having special episodes released to paying customers only? Is it something you'd recommend? Somehow I thought this wasn't supported by the iTunes architecture. Just a thought. It's not supported by iTunes, so you couldn't have a paid podcast in iTunes. But there are a couple of things that you could do. Is you could obviously set up your podcast as a digital product on your website, and you can sell access to that. So maybe you sell some sort of membership or subscription that people have to get to this specific content. And I suppose one way that you could do that is, you have the half-hour show that is put out on iTunes, but then maybe you record for an hour and a half, but you cut it down, and you could allow people to listen. The premium subscribers could get the whole thing, kind of get the deleted scenes like they have on DVDs. That would be one way to do it. Or you could just do some premium interviews. I mean, maybe you have some interviews with folks that that you think are going to be really valuable for folks, and so you make them pay for that. Of course, now there's that decision to make, and there's that balancing act of, okay, if this is really valuable, wouldn't it also be really valuable for audience attraction to have out there? So it's really going to depend on what your goals are, what your funnels look like, all of that, and so you're going to have to make that decision. I think there's ways that this could work, and for example, with something like Rainmaker, it would be really, really easy for it to work, just having some different member groups and assigning who can access content that way. And I believe, the other way to do it too, and this might be the smartest way to do it, and I know Mark Maron used to do this. I haven't looked at his site in a while, so I don't know if he still does it. But you make the episodes when they're first live, you make them freely available to everybody. And for a certain period of time, they're freely available. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's a month, maybe it's a year, whatever it is. And then once it's in the archive, however you determine the archive to be, now you have to pay to get those old episodes. And maybe it's $1.99 per episode. Maybe it's $9.99 a month to get access to the archive whenever people want it. however you set that up, that would be the other way to do it. And in my mind, probably the best way to do it, because now you get the benefit of that episode going out there and attracting attention, and you can promote it and you can do all of that. But for people who are really interested in your show, if they want to go back and mine the archives for some of the best stuff, now they have to pay a couple bucks to listen to it. It's not a bad option.
It's true.
That's the one I've worked
like
for.
Dan Carlin, exactly. Hardcore History, right? The last however many episodes are completely free on iTunes. Then he pulls them off iTunes, and you have to buy them for $2.
Yep.
So I haven't thought about this, but it could be. Well, I mean, it's super successful for somebody like Dan Carlin. It really does work, right?
He packages his together because he'll have like a 5-episode series on World War II, and then you can buy the whole package.
See, that's what I was going to say. Like, what if you think about it more in terms of like, if I just make my individual episodes now paid, then I'll make money. It's like, what if you curate stuff, like curate groups? People love that. Like, there's people I know that write blog posts, and they're like top 5 blog posts on a topic that they pull out of Google Analytics, they put together into an ebook and sell it on Amazon. Completely freely available separately on their website, and they just sell it on Amazon. People want to buy packages of things. It's a reason why I'm making a Hack the Entrepreneur Top 10. Obviously, those 10 episodes are available on my site, but they're not curated. And I have people excited, like they can't wait to see what those top 10 are. It's like, well, you've probably heard them, but it's a curated list of people. And so you can do that. Like, you can take certain topics from your episodes and maybe put them into packages of 5 or 10 and then sell those. Or at least you can even sell them for email addresses if you want. Like, you can take lists and then like people subscribe to these and get these 10 of this topic, and people will be interested in it. Not it's like subscribe and get my 150 random episodes. It's not as alluring as get these ones on habits, in my case, to be, or mindset. People will be like, wow, this is kind of cool. I'm interested in that. And then I can kind of go through. So you just kind of have to think in that way. That's why curation for email works really well, because you've done the work and brought it together for people in this. We like to digest it in that way. So maybe think about your own content, how you could curate it into packages. Plus, you can always turn those audio into transcripts and things as well, and then you can sell those. There's lots you can do with your content if we don't just continually think about just creating more content. So I think you're thinking in the right direction for sure, and it's going to just take you some experimentation to see what you can do. I mean, the disclaimer for Dan Carlin and obviously Mark Maron is they both get millions of downloads an episode. And so even if 0.00001% of listeners buys an episode for $2, they still make really good money, right? The rest of us who have not nearly as many downloads, those numbers are a lot harder to work with. So you might do a whole bunch of work, and you might even decrease your listenership and make $1 every 3 weeks. And then it's kind of like, well, the point to the show originally was to kind of be going wide and finding people that are interested in you and your brand and your message. And that's by giving it out for free. So you do have to sort of balance that. But I think if you leave it free and then curate, I think you'd be really kind of golden.
I just thought of an episode idea while you were talking.
Nice.
The 4 C's that people pay for. All right. Content is the obvious one. Like, people will pay for content. But I think we underestimate the other C's that people will pay for. One is convenience, just the ease of getting to that content. The other one kind of goes with it, which is curation. People will pay for curation because it's like Copyblogger has an archive that goes back to, 2007, 2008, even before that. So it's hard to dig in there. But if you can go out and pull in the 10 best copywriting posts from Copyblogger, people would potentially pay for that. Again, either with money or with their email address, but it's all value. And then the other one is context. People will pay for context. So the content itself is important, but can you put it in the proper context and let people know why it's important? So content, context, curation, and convenience, those C's in some combination, people will pay for. And the more compelling combination of C's that you can put together, then the better offer that you're going to be able to put together. And yes, as Jamar says, people pay for coffee as well.
That's what that was for.
They do, yes.
I was hoping this was one of the C's.
Yes, since you are such a coffee aficionado. But yeah, so so that's what to think about.
Smart.
That's why it works so well for Dan Carlin, because it's like you go to his site, and instead of having to try and dig through the archives and go back and find that one about World War II, it's like, oh, so for $9 or whatever, I can just pay right here, right now, download all of these in this package, and I get this, and I can go listen to it. Boom. And also, I support him, which is another thing. Like, people will pay to support you, and let people know that. So that's the other thing, and that's, I guess you call that kindness. There's got to be a C word for that. Cooperation or something. There's a C word for that. For people will pay to support you. We're going to figure this out, all right? We're going to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, so that, that works, and really think about that. And
well, really, this is ultimately how Netflix, created $1 billion business, and also completely at the same time destroyed pirating of TV shows and movies. Pirating was the biggest thing, and all they were going to do is they were going to throw everybody in jail who ever downloaded a movie for free or a TV show for free. But that was all people could really do for the longest time, because there was if you didn't want to pay for an insane cable television to have everything else, that's literally to have all of iTunes. I didn't want to do that. And so what did Netflix do? They curated things. So it's like, here, now for $10 a month, I can literally have all the episodes of a show in one spot. I never have to go look for all these different parts of it. And it's like, yeah, you can still go get it for free if you really want to. And very few people do. But to me, that was genius. They just curated everything into a thing, put a $10 a month price tag on it. And people were like, it'll never work because you can get it all for free. It's like, yes, but they're giving you convenience and they're giving you curation right there. And it's a multi-billion-dollar company based on that. From readily available, already produced content curated into packages for you. It's brilliant.
We're gonna add this idea to the Trello board so that we don't forget about it, and so we can do this as an episode. It's got me thinking about all these ideas now.
Yeah.
New ways to monetize. Okay, so excellent question, Rodrigo. Thank you for asking that. Jamar asks, when recording shows that would be turned into a course, do you worry about backlash from your loyal listeners who have already heard the content? How to differentiate from the normal podcast experience? This is an interesting and timely question, because we are currently recording episodes of the Showrunner that are going to become free courses. We're doing 3 episodes of my free course, 3 episodes of your free course, and kind of doing it in real time. But what do you think about that? Because we talk about how the benefit of a podcast is you can take that content and do a lot of you can repurpose it in a lot of different ways. Do you worry about backlash from the people who have already listened to the podcast?
No, I'm trying to get my head around that. It's, to me, you have the wrong, I think, mindset, Jarmar. It's valuable content to the person who experiences it right now. So your loyal listeners are getting it sort of live from you as it comes. They're not also then going to go and subscribe to our mini course based on that. But new people who show up on showrunner.fm today, and there's now a new course that was created. Right now, it doesn't really make sense. But in 3 months, it's up, and those shows are no longer live, and people who are just finding us are going to the last 10 episodes, and they'll never hear those, but they can get them curated in one space. So this goes exactly back to what we were doing. We're giving them convenience and curation. And because we know that our dedicated listeners aren't going to probably go subscribe to that thing because it's kind of directed to people who are just discovering us, and it's a great way to kind of get through the content. You guys get the benefit of having it live, and it would be weird for us to hide that from you and then also want you on the other side. Our dedicated listeners are already probably on an email list, and they already have that connection to us. So it's this idea and this mindset that I had just about repurposing of content across different sort of mediums and platforms that always really stuck with me. It was like hard for me to overcome. And once I did and let it go, like that's from like newsletter to like a copy blogger post to a showrunner episode, all those things to sometimes ending up in my book, all across those platforms, because it works in one. And so if I can just get it in front of more people, it makes sense. And we're all too busy. Our loyal listeners are too busy to like have a back. They're not going to be, if you go and see the opt-in for this course, which you might in 2 or 3 months, I don't think that you're going to think back 3 months and be like, whoa, these buggers already, I listened to this. You're just not going to opt into that. That's perfect. That's totally cool. But new people coming are going to get this curated process of, they're not going to have to weed through. Like, we're doing it. Every second episode is one part. So it's like disjointed as you're listening to it live. And it's just cool content. But then we're going to put them all together into a package so people have exactly the 4 C's right there for them. So I think you just need to sort of get over the fact that you're providing value to the person, to different people in different places. And that's it. People, no matter how much they love me, when they find Hack the Entrepreneur today, they do not go backwards through the last 219 episodes. As much as I want to kid myself that they're going to spend the next 3 weeks only listening to me, they're not. And so if I can now pull out the top 10 for them and bring them, it's not going to be, I don't think people who listen to those episodes are going to be mad because, like, well, you already played those episodes. You see what I mean? It's value for new people, and it's value for existing people in different places at different times and in different sort of packages, if you will.
And you can add additional value for the existing folks. So you can add more context, right? So let's say, like, with these free courses, this free course that we're doing on the Showrunner, we're recording these 3 episodes. Well, we've put the 3 episodes out there, okay, and you listen to it, and there's nothing else really to do. For each one of these, we could have a worksheet, and we could probably develop a worksheet in about 15 to 20 minutes that we put with this. For, okay, here's some things that you need to kind of work out when you're thinking about differentiating your show. And you could have something on here for, planning your interviews and some different things to fill out. So you can add that. And you can add other value adds, like maybe there's a private webinar that we do just about these topics, or, a bonus 4th episode that takes it, and adds one more piece. So you could do that little extra that, of course, is going to be a bonus to the people who have never heard the content before. But even for the people who have heard the content, number one, some people may have heard it, on that walk 6 weeks ago, but now they're really ready to do something with it. So it's like, okay, let me buckle down, really listen, take notes. I'm going to get this extra thing. I've got this worksheet. So in a sense, for some of the people, you'll be doing them a favor by reminding them of something that they wanted to act on before. But we all know, as much as we want to, we listen to podcasts, and the greatest strength of a podcast can also be its greatest weakness, right? A podcast, we can listen to it anywhere, but a lot of times we listen to it in places where we can't take action on what we're hearing, even if we're really enthused. Like when I'm out a half mile away from my house and I'm all excited about what I've just listened to, sometimes I wish I was sitting right there at my computer. And try as I might, sometimes by the time I get home, I've lost the impulse to do whatever I was going to do. And sometimes I'm happy when I'm reminded of that later. And so, let's remember that. And we can help people do that. And, a good example of this, Jamar, is if you go to rainmaker.fm, and maybe you already are, but if you subscribe to the free training, all of those first 8 lessons in the free training were podcast episodes, like not with anything added or edited, like verbatim. That's the podcast episode. And it's great for signing up new people who weren't around 2 years ago, and they still sign up on that all the time because it's still relevant content. But even when we initially launched it, right after those episodes had gone out, there were an additional 3 webinars added on there, private free webinars that Brian did that added additional value even to the people who had already listened to those episodes. And so that's the way to do it, and absolutely not fear at all that you might have backlash, is just to add a little bit extra. But I think the fear of backlash is probably probably overestimating how much of that there will be. I think the worst that would happen is just some indifference from people who have already heard it, and that's fine. Yeah,
exactly. So here's a question for you. We've talked about this many times, and maybe we didn't even discuss it when we did this ourselves. So this is literally like seeing now behind the scenes of our madness. But we talk about how every piece of content, everything you're creating, you need to know what the purpose of it is. And so I've always seen these mini courses as lead like sort of magnets or reasons for people to sign up to our email when they end up on our site. It's something that like I think people are going to be really into that are into podcasts. They're going to get there and be like, wow, cool. And that's a way for us to take them deeper. I never thought of it as that we'd be creating these mini courses for people who have already listened to it on the way through. We're doing it in a way that it's both, so that you get absolute value out of listening to it, and we're making them into full episodes, and so that they work really well as episodes. But I was always thinking of it as new people. They come through, and you know how people go to a website maybe once, and if you don't grab them that time with the right thing, you might not be able to keep contact with them again. So what was your thought process? What were we creating this for? What was the purpose of this content?
The 2 free courses we're doing right now? I mean, I think, so I had a few different thoughts on it. Number one is what you just said. Number 2 is to help take the people who have been listening and thinking about being showrunners and give them even a little bit more of a runway to get started. Because I think some people are afraid, okay, how am I ever going to actually create a differentiated show? Well, here, we're going to create this free course to eliminate that excuse, because we're going to walk you through it. Same thing for interviews, because I think people are they can be a little scared about the interview process. Well, here are these steps to do it. And so I think it's for some of those people who have been listening for a while, but maybe have been a little bit worried about that. And the other thing too is, look, our ultimate goal eventually is to get people into the Showrunner podcasting course. Mm-hmm. And so having a step for people to go from listener now to course member, even if it's free course member, they're now a closer step toward being a paid course member. And of course, you and I have already talked about a great idea for, because it's a big ask to go from free course to, $600 for the Showrunner podcasting course. Even if it's very valuable at that price, that's still a big jump. So now the next thing would be having a course that's kind of in the middle of that. Where it's maybe, and we have not even figured out pricing, whether it's $19.99 or $149 or what the best thing is going to be able to do. So for me, it's starting to get a really good sequence of courses that we walk people through, that however people want to engage with us, they can. If they want some extra free content, to kind of get them on that next step, it's there. If they want kind of a smaller free course about a very specific topic, it's there. If they want the whole thing, it's there. And that's what we haven't had, is it's podcast, email list, big course. Right. We need those stepping stones. So to me, it was kind of the first part of creating those stepping stones that we've been missing.
Okay. So it was almost for existing listeners.
Both. So I think it's for both, but I think there are specific reasons why either one would get it, and we need to remember those. Right. I think for the existing people, we do want something extra. Not just the episodes, but hey, if you listen to these episodes, you'll also get this worksheet so you can actually take action on the episodes.
And that's also makes it more valuable for new people. I mean, the whole thing gets more valuable. So this is actually interesting, because this almost takes us back to this idea of outsourcing. The only reason why you outsource is for leverage, so that you are one person and your finite amount of hours can be scaled across other people doing multiple things for your show. But if you maybe don't have the money for outsourcing directly, doing something like we're doing, where you're creating an episode and you're with the idea of consciously turning those 3 episodes into a mini course, you've kind of done the same thing as outsourcing right now. Because every hour you spend creating that episode and publishing it is now hours spent creating a mini course. So you've leveraged your time dramatically. And so this is like a really powerful way to think about your time when you don't have money to outsource, rather than just thinking, oh, I wish I was like John and I had the money to outsource because then I could do better. It's like, well, right, but you can leverage and you can scale your time by doing things that go across multiple channels, and really think about it in that way. It's the best way to possibly start doing it, rather than I'll do this and then I'll do this, because you can't do all of it, right? So it's, to me, I found that interesting, because it's kind of like we've gone back in the conversation, but this is probably the best way to start leveraging your time, is to do things that you can use multiple ways. And maybe it's not 100% ideal, Jarmar, you're right. But it can't be. It needs to, there's only so much of you to go around. And people would rather have more than they would have less. And rather than perfect and perfect and perfect, they'd rather have 80% good across a bunch of channels and consumption ways for them to consume it.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, the more I think about it, the more, and we need to do this with the showrunner, frankly, just with some free podcast episodes, is have opportunities for people who come to you later to go back and engage with your best content or your cornerstone content, one or the other or both. Because I find I've been on kind of a binge of finding some new podcasts now, like some podcasts about parenting. And then I just wanted to kind of freshen up because I felt like my podcast subscriptions had gotten stale. And a lot of them you get there, and I find this great episode that's recent. And I'm like, man, I wonder how many great episodes they have back there. But I'm not going to go back and I'm not going to go back unless it's just like the greatest show in the history of the world and blows my hair back so much that I have to. But I can't really think of a podcast where I've gone back and looked in the archive for old episodes, except for maybe like I think with the Tim Ferriss show, like I went back and looked for a Jamie Foxx episode or something that people had really been talking about. But, like that was like a little one-off thing. But there have been a lot of times, and I've wished, it's like, man, I wish they would just tell me like, here are 5 best episodes, or here are like kind of the cornerstone episodes, because I would go do that. And I think we need to do that with the showrunner, and we've talked about it. And we're kind of getting into it here with the free course.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to start doing it with Rainmaker FM. Actually, we had a big talk about that in Denver. And once you get, there's really 2 ways that you're ready for this. I think it's number one, when you have a big archive, so that you have enough where you can do a best of. Like if you're on your 20th episode and you're trying to do a best of, I mean, I don't know. Like, I guess you could.
Top 10 of 20.
Yeah, like, seems a little pretentious. But at 20 episodes, you could do a cornerstone series. And that's how I would position it. You could be on your 20th episode. And, it's like we do with the 4 elements, right? Authenticity, usefulness, sustainability, and profitability. And we have that on the email list. So we kind of do that. And we do link people out to episodes there. But once you get, those cornerstone episodes, and maybe it's a 4-episode series, you can put that together and send people to that. And it really, really helps, because people are really excited about your show when they first subscribe and they first listen. It's like, man, this is great. So having a place for people to go can be really helpful.
Yeah. You can do it in like an infinite number of ways. Even with 20, you can sort of break it up into just different sections. But even at 20 episodes, if I find a show, I'm probably not going to have time to go back through 20 episodes. Mm-hmm. So don't think like, well, I don't have 200. 20 is a daunting amount for a new listener. They're probably just going to go move ahead with you if they subscribe. So you're right. You need to really, it's not easy though, right? But you just got to be creative and think of different ways, different sort of, I guess, correlated ways that your episodes go, or the cornerstone, or whatever you want to do it with. But don't underestimate it, because you've already created the content, right? It's just now organizing it.
So Nance has a comment here. This is interesting. It also means we have to be more purposeful in interviewing, so shows really dig deeper on specific issues. Do you think that something like this, does it change your interview strategy, or is it still, each interview is its own thing, where you're looking to dig as deep as you were going to about whatever topic is the most important with that person that you're interviewing. But it may mean that your organization of the interviews is more purposeful, or your personal curation of the interviews is more purposeful. Like maybe you talk about the same topic across 3 different interviews. And so you do a bonus episode where you curate the best about, the best moments from each of those episodes. Like how would this affect your interviewing? Has what you're doing now with Hack the Entrepreneur affected how you've approached the interviews that you do?
No. And I personally don't want it to. I feel like the way the interviews are going have brought me to where I am. Now it's my job as the showrunner to kind of look back and think of creative ways to correlate the episodes. So whether it's like the top 10 female entrepreneurs, or the top 10 software conversations, or the top 10 conversations about habits, I have enough that I can kind of pull those out based on the conversations. But I also have a structure of a conversation where I know where my end goal is, I know where my starting point is, and I take people through those checkpoints, right? So my conversations do somewhat stay in those places to a certain degree.
Were you thinking about this from the beginning? I mean, it's more like you went heads down and you knew you wanted to do interviews with entrepreneurs, and you get, correct me if I'm wrong, but then you get kind of to the top of the mountain and you look back and you've got all this stuff now. And now you can think about how to put it together and organize it. But once you amass that number, and I guess what was purposeful was that you tried to get entrepreneurs in different areas, but were you necessarily thinking that this was going to be the end game?
No, not at all. It was actually when I joined Rainmaker and going to build a new site. Then it was like, okay, at that point I had like 80 episodes or something. It's like, how can I like sort of make these a little bit more digestible? So I broke them down into the 5 categories, which were kind of where my questions went. And we just tagged those conversations as we publish, we tagged them. So you're right. It didn't make sense at the time. And yeah, so it's hard to know if it should change sort of what you're doing. But I mean, it could, Nance. Like, I mean, that's exactly what Jared and I just talked about. How, I mean, we are the showrunner episodes right now, the next, or like the 6 in a row, are 100% dictated by this content we want to create. So if we would have been solo showrunners at this, we would have probably done that around interviews, and we would have just brought in specific experts to cover those, then we can package them up and trade them for email addresses. So absolutely, it's just a matter of, again, where you're at in it. I was at 80 episodes when I started thinking about this, so I had enough that I could pull. Now I'm at 200 when I'm really getting into it, and it's like I have enough that I can kind of make up sections that I think people coming to my site will be interested in. That's all it's really about. It's about the visitor. It's about the listener. It's not so much what I want, right? It's what they want, and I need to figure that out to choose. And luckily, when I built my new site, or when Rainmaker did, we put those 5 buttons for choose your hack, and I have analytics on those. And my least favorite hack of all of them, which is habits, is by far the most popular one clicked of anybody. And it's made me actually sort of push the conversations in that way, because that's what people are into. I can't change that. It's not about me, right? It's about my listener. It's about my visitor. That's what makes it more successful.
You can just be real subliminal with it. Like, be real sarcastic in your interviews when you start talking about habits.
Oh, so what's your latest habit?
Yeah, what kind of habits do you have? that way your audience will get the point.
Right, but I could also choose to ignore that data if I really want to. But it's cool to have it, right? It's cool to know what that is. And that was literally just breaking things into categories using like basic WordPress categorization, like, or tagging. I just tagged each episode as 2 things, like habits, mindset, whatever, across it, and that was it. And then you can correlate those. And now analytics just tells me where people are heading. And it kind of shows. It can dictate my content if I want, which is an interesting way to do it. So,
by the way, I've got another brilliant business idea for you. You know how we always kind of figure out these iterations of hack the entrepreneur with words rhyming with hack? Here's my latest one for you. Slack the entrepreneur. How entrepreneurs are using Slack to next level their business. Sponsored by Slack.
Wow. I thought it was actually going to be just like slacking, like just close the laptop. I'm going.
Well, that could be it.
Hacky Slack and just like
like how using Slack makes people more efficient so that they can Slack more.
Wow, Slack has a podcast.
Sponsored by Slack. Oh, I didn't know they had a podcast.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Nice. Anyway,
just gifts. It's just gifts.
Yeah. Alrighty.
That's cool though. Yeah. See, I mean, there's endless ones.
Yes.
And I think if you're creative enough, I think you can go back through a lot of episodes and really package them up in so many different ways. I think you really can. I mean, you can do. I mean, at this point with me, I can do like a top 10 of the first 100 if I want, or a summary of the second 100, or you know what I mean? Like, it really is it's just limited by the amount of work we want to put into packaging it and kind of understanding what our audience wants.
Yes, it is. Well, Johnny, this brings us to the end of our hour. I have to go hop on an editorial call here with the Rainmaker Digital team. It should be fun.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, but this has been fun, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another one of these, but we'll probably switch the time to a few hours later so that I can shower. Right. I promise I'll be back with regular hair and not a hat on. I did shave before this one, just so you know.
Really?
Well, yeah, but it was, I know.
What?
I know it's one of those like you shave to make it look like you don't shave. It's
Right.
Yeah. Anyway,
That's cool.
this is going to get embarrassing if we continue on.
It kind of is.
Bob says the last time he shaved was 1976.
Nice.
It's because Bob is the man. He's the man. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Showrunner Huddle. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Ask your questions. Save your questions. We're excited to talk about them, and we will talk to you then.